Can I write a book in 30 days while closing on a house and moving? Today's the first update. I just finished day one and I wanted to tell you how it went and talk about some facets of content creation that should be helpful regardless of what you're doing, whether you're trying to write a book in 30 days or build a YouTube channel or what have you. So like all of these updates, I'm going to start today off with a bit of inspiration. And today's inspirational meme comes from Millennial Memes for Existential Extremes. And I will link to that Facebook account below. They have some great memes. They're very funny, but this is today's. Don't chase your dreams. Humans are persistence predators. Follow your dreams at a sustainable pace until they get tired and lie down. So this is a nice reminder that when it comes to content creation, especially doing it as a career, doing it long term, it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And thankfully, humans are persistence predators. Your dream can only outrun you for so long. I actually really like that. And before we get into the update and how much progress I'm making, or not, I wanted to get into an important point about planning. I mentioned in the last video that to prepare for this challenge of finishing my novel in 30 days, that I reread the manuscript as it was, the partial that I had finished, and I reread it very closely and created a 21-point to write list, kind of like a to-do list for writers. I did that. I actually did that about a week before I started this challenge. And I did that because I wanted to give it time to let it incubate, to let it sit, to let me have some notions, and to kind of emotionally adjust to doing the project, give myself a little break beforehand, get all the YouTube stuff shored up, get my life shored up. The bulk of this first session involved rereading the manuscript again. And this was because the first thing I had to write on my to-write list was 76 pages, single-spaced MS Word pages into the manuscript, which is 153 pages in its partial form. So it was about halfway through the book before I had to write anything new. The beginning is really shored up. You'll remember what I said about middles being difficult for me. That's when I really start to feel the pain. So I had to make sure I didn't write anything that conflicted with what I'd written before. So I reacquainted myself with the work. And I also found that as I reread today, that I was tweaking and reworking the language I had further to make it better, to tighten it up, to add clarity when it made sense to. So today's session, I worked for about 2 hours on the book total. And about the first 90 minutes of that was rereading and tweaking what I already had. So that left about 30 minutes of actual work on point one. And about 10 minutes of that 30-minute period was actually spent looking at it and reading it and really thinking about what I needed to write. So the first point on my list was a messy transitional section. These are frequently abandoned by me. If I give up and I get frustrated, that's what's happening usually. Basically, this was a conversation with a couple of suspects and my detectives. And I had a few additional things that I wanted the suspects to say, but I had to connect those things to what had already been said in a way that was natural and didn't feel forced. And then after that conversation with the suspects, there's a couple of quick pivots between two locations. The first one, my main characters are opening a locker that belonged to the victim, and then they're heading back to the truck that they drove there to discover a nasty surprise waiting for them inside the truck while they've been out investigating. And then when they get to the truck, they have an argument about what this nasty surprise could mean. And the argument that they have with the truck was already written. So I had basically had to write the end of conversation one while incorporating dialogue that past me thought was important to include. And then I had to transition between two other locations and find a way to transition into the words in dialogue two, where they're arguing, that already existed. It was highly technical, a lot of fussy, nuanced words fitting things in, but it actually came together pretty quickly for me. I managed to fix it all in about 20 minutes. And that's because I took a first thought, best thought approach. What's that? Well, that's something I've learned from improv comedians. So my husband Justin and I subscribe to Dropout, which is an improv comedy channel. It's a streaming service. And essentially, when improvising, comedians frequently will go with the first thing that pops into their head and just roll with it, rather than spending any time deliberating or wondering if there's something better they could say, because time is of the essence, the hesitation ruins the comic timing, etc., etc. And I found that approach actually helpful in this instance, because I realized that I'd originally gotten too mired in the paradox of choice and decision paralysis, which is essentially the psychological principle that having too many choices can actually make it harder to decide, even if they're all good choices, and especially if they're all good choices. So my first thoughts on how to fix this transitional scene, they were all solid choices. And I assured myself as I was implementing them that I can change or spruce up those quick first thoughts when I return to the draft on the edit. And frankly, I believed it because I quickly tied up a lot of my original writing on that first pass, that review session this morning. I did the same thing. I could easily nip and tuck, change anything that sticks out later. So it was a very decisive, quick session for me once I actually got the show underway. Anyway, as far as my real life and everything outside of the challenge, it's been wild times balancing everything. I mentioned in the last episode that we recently had an offer accepted on a house, so we were up late last night shopping for various home insurances, both standard, and I was also pricing out earthquake insurance, flood insurance, etc., trying to figure out what was worth it, what isn't, what's a good vendor, etc. So there's lots of homework on the house. But on a positive note, the title search came back clear, so there's no liens on the property. I was actually really concerned about that because my sister had one come up when she bought her home back in the day, and she had to get a real estate lawyer involved, and it was a nightmare, and I'm just really glad that we're not gonna have to do that. Otherwise, I have loads of thumbnails to make for YouTube for both of my channels, and I have to do laundry. But overall, it's a great first full day on the novel writing project. I'll talk to you tomorrow about how it's going. I will link the playlist below for this so you can follow along. All of these episodes are going to be freestanding as they come. I'm always going to have a lesson or something you can learn, the inspiration, so they'll be useful even if you aren't a writer, but I figure I'll have it easy for people to watch the whole thing as well if they want to. At any time of the process, go back and see what I'm doing. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.